All right, we are live. We are live. We are doing a really short stream right now. But let's look into this. Where are my glasses? All right, that's where the glasses. Boom. We're looking into this idea that late life mathematicians turn into philosophers. At the end of their lives, mathematicians turn into philosophers, and we found some very interesting things. Let's see. Kurt Gödel is an archetype. After his incompleteness theorems revolutionized logic in his 30s, he spent his later decades at Princeton barely publishing mathematics at all, immersing himself in Leibniz, working on a formal version of the ontological argument for God's existence, and developing a full-blown Platonist philosophy in which mathematical objects are as real as physical ones and perceived by a kind of intuition. Alexander Grothendieck, arguably the greatest mathematician of the 20th century, abandoned mathematics at the height of its powers and spent his final decades writing thousands of pages of philosophical, spiritual, and autobiographical meditation. Hippolyte A. Semi is less a math text than a confession about creativity, ego, and the soul. Who created the mathematics of infinite increasingly devoted himself to theology, convinced that his transfinite numbers had been communicated to him by God and corresponding. Actually, I think I looked at specifically. Yes, I really like this. All right, so let's look at Ricolten ASMI. Harvest and Sowings is one of the strangest and most haunting documents in the history of mathematics, and Grothendieck's story makes it stranger still. The backstory: by the late 1960s, Alexander Grothendieck had rebuilt algebraic, algebraic geometry from the ground up. His work at the IHES in Paris schemes Topos theory, the machinery that later enabled the proof of Fermat's last theorem, wasn't just a set of results but a new way of thinking, famous for its style. Rather than attacking a problem directly, he would generalize an abstract until the problem dissolved, opening like a nut soaked in water rather than cracked with a hammer. His own metaphor: the rising sea that gradually submerges the problem. Then in 1970, at 42, and at the absolute height of his powers, he discovered the IHS received partial military funding and resigned. Oh wow. IHS. He drifted into radical pacifism and environmentalism, took marginal teaching posts, and progressively withdrew from the mathematical world entirely. Wow. Attacking a problem directly, he would generalize an abstract until the problem dissolved, opening like a nut soaked in water. Written mostly in the mid 1980s, Rekolt and Semi runs well over 1,000 pages and was never conventionally published in his lifetime. It circulated as photocopies and scans among mathematicians like Semizdat, finally receiving an official French edition only in 2022 after his death. It's nominally a reflection and testimony on a mathematician's past, where it's really several books interleaved. A meditation on creativity, the most beloved passages describe what discovery actually feels like from the inside. What discovery feels like from the inside. You know? He distinguishes the builder from the explorer, writes about the fertility of solitude, and insists the capacity that matters in research is intelligence, but a kind of innocence, the willingness to be alone, to not know, to look at things as a child does. He describes himself as less brilliant than many colleagues, but more willing to dwell patiently in confusion. He describes himself as less brilliant than many colleagues, but more willing to dwell patiently in confusion. As an indictment, large stretches are increasingly bitter accounting of what he saw as the betrayal of his work. Students and colleagues who, after his withdrawal, buried or appropriated his ideas without credit. Students and colleagues who, after his withdrawal, buried or appropriated his ideas without credit. He names names. Mathematicians still argue about how fair any of it was. Even sympathetic readers find these sections painful. The wounded ego of a man who claimed to be diagnosing ego itself. Wow. A spiritual confession threaded through everything is self examination in an almost Augustinian register, analysis of his own vanity, his relationship to his parents. His father was an anarchist revolutionary who died in Auschwitz. Dreams and what he called the conflict between the creative child and the boss or self image that suffocates it. Later writings went further into the explicitly mystical, including thousands of pages of meditations on dreams as messages of gods. On dreams. Interesting. Wait, am I still able to use Fable right now? Ah, Fable 5 is currently unavailable. So now we have to switch to Opus 4.8. In 91, he vanished, moved to a tiny Pyrenean village, La Serre, refused nearly all contact, demanded his works be withdrawn for publication, and lived as a hermit, reportedly, absorbed in writing tens of thousands of pages of meditations. Until his death in 2014, the villagers knew him as an eccentric old man who grew his own food. Most had no idea he was among the greatest mathematicians who ever lived. Grothendieck, Alexander Grothendieck, Dieck. While matters for a thread, he's the extreme case of the pattern we discussed where Grothendieck, the mathematics and the metaphysics were never really separate. The same drive that pushed him to seek the most general structure behind every theorem eventually pushed past mathematics entirely toward the structure behind the self, behind creativity, behind existence. The tragedy, or maybe the consistency, is that he followed the abstraction all the way out of the world. The man who gave mathematics its most expansive vision of unity ended in the most radical isolation. As if total generality and total solitude were two faces of the same pursuit. Now we're looking at G.H. Hardy. Writing a mathematician's apology, not mathematics, with a meditation on beauty, youth, and what a mathematical life means. Wow. Melancholy counterpoint to Grothendieck's, where Grothendieck walked away from mathematics, he abandoned by it. The most productive collaboration in the history, his discovery of Ramanujan. Militant atheist, cricket obsessive, lifelong bachelor, charming and self-deprecating, who considered his association with Ramanujan the one romantic incident in my life. What happened to the partnership of G.H. Hardy and Ramanujan? Tragedy intervened. Intuition, rigor, vision, proof, discovery, verification, mystical, rational, self-taught, formally trained. Recognizing Ramanujan's genius. Hardy never really got over it. Decades later, when asked about his greatest contribution to mathematics, he didn't mention his own theorems. He said it was discovering Ramanujan. My association with him is the one romantic incident in my life. Hardy was not talking about romance in a literal sense. He meant that Ramanujan's arrival felt like one of those rare encounters that transforms a life. A meeting with someone so extraordinary that it acquires the emotional texture of a great love story, except the object or devotion was mathematics itself. There is something almost poetic about it. Hardy spent his life worshipping mathematical beauty. Ramanujan appeared from the other side of the world carrying beauty that nobody else could see. Hardy recognized it. They worked together for only a few years. Ramanujan died young. Was not merely a colleague, he was living proof that genius exists. And once you have met that kind of genius, the rest of life can feel a little dimmer by comparison. Oh my god. Wow. 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 He was living proof that genius exists, and once you have met that kind of genius, the rest of life can feel a little dimmer by comparison. Where are these geniuses hiding, and how can I find them? They're usually not hiding at all. They're often sitting in plain sight, obsessed with something that most people consider strangely specific. Accounting clerk in Madras filing notebooks with formulas. Ramanujan. Grothendieck spent years working quietly before the mathematical world fully understood what he was building. The young Richard Feynman was fixing radios for neighbors. Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak met through a mutual friend because both were unusually obsessed with electronics. The pattern is not that geniuses are hidden, the pattern is that everyone else is looking somewhere else. What genius looks like before recognition. Obsession, curiosity, eccentricity, depth over breadth, poor social signaling. Obsession, curiosity, eccentricity, depth over breadth, poor social signaling, a tendency to disappear into a subject for years. A genius often looks less like a celebrity and more like someone who can't stop thinking about one thing. The mathematician is filing notebooks, the programmer is building strange projects at 2 a.m. The filmmaker is making short films nobody watches. The biologist is collecting insects for fun. The future masterpiece usually arrives disguised as a hobby. And the frontier of genuine curiosity. For you specifically, this is interesting because your life already revolves around conversations, live streams, technology, art founders, and researchers. The places most likely to contain future geniuses are small niche Discord servers, research labs, graduate departments, open source communities, tiny YouTube channels, specialized conferences, long form podcasts, hobbyist communities, not because those places are magical, because they are places where people are rewarded by intrinsic fascination rather than status. The signal is strongest before money arrives. The signal is strongest before money arrives. His greater talent may have been recognition. Thousands of people received letters. Only Hardy looked at Ramanujan's formulas and realized this cannot be ordinary. Very few are training themselves to recognize it. Recognition requires taste, taste requires exposure, exposure requires curiosity. Most people are searching for genius, very few are training themselves to recognize it. Recognition requires taste, taste requires exposure, exposure requires curiosity. Taste requires exposure, exposure requires curiosity, a useful heuristic. When you meet someone, ask what could this person talk about enthusiastically for 3 hours without preparation. Most people have an answer. A few people eyes light up in a different way. They stop performing, they stop networking, they stop managing impressions. They enter flow. That's often where you discover the thing they are becoming extraordinary at. The deeper answer, many of the great talent spotters weren't searching for geniuses. They were searching for people who were genuinely in love with something. Hardy found Ramanujan because he loved mathematics enough to recognize mathematical beauty. Hardy found Ramanujan because he loved mathematics enough to recognize mathematical beauty. If you spend years immersed in AI, art, entrepreneurship, science, philosophy, and storytelling, you will develop the same kind of taste. If you spend years, if you spend years immersed in, if you spend years immersed in AI, art, entrepreneurship, science, philosophy, and storytelling, you will develop the same kind of taste. Then one day you will meet someone who says something that makes the hairs on your arms stand up, not because they are famous, not because they are rich, but because they are seeing something nobody else sees. That's usually how these encounters begin. A letter arrives from India, a weird GitHub project appears, a tiny YouTube channel has 37 subscribers, graduate student asks an unusual question, and the future quietly walks into the room. Why apology? The title uses the old sense, a defense. His creative power is gone. He's brutally frank about the premise. A mathematician writing about mathematics rather than doing it has, by his own standard, already failed. Exposition, criticism, and appreciation are, he says, work for second-rate minds, and the sting is that he's describing the book he's writing as he writes it. Haunting sadness, the testament of a creative artist, mourning powers that would never return. Mathematics is an aesthetic activity. The mathematician, like the painter or poet, is a maker of patterns, and the patterns must be beautiful. Beauty is the first test. And there is no permanent place in the world for ugly mathematics. Wow. Wow, this guy's talking about beauty in mathematics. Okay. Mathematics is an aesthetic activity. The mathematician, like the painter or poet, is a maker of patterns, and the patterns must be beautiful. Beauty is the first test, and there is no permanent place in the world for ugly mathematics. He illustrates with Euclid's proof of infinite primes and the irrationality of under root 2. Proofs prized not for usefulness but for elegance, economy, surprise, and depth. He illustrates with Euclid's proof of infinite primes and the irrationality of square root 2. Not for usefulness but for elegance, economy, surprise, and depth. Mathematics is an aesthetic activity. The famous defense of uselessness. Hardy argues that the best mathematics is precisely the most useless. Pure number theory had, in his view, no practical application. And he took pride in that because what cannot be applied cannot be weaponized. Writing during a war, he found consolation in believing his life's work was gentle and clean, that real mathematics had no effects on war. History delivered the great irony. Number theory now underlies all modern cryptography. Your bank transactions run on the primes. Hardy thought gloriously inapplicable, and his era's useless relativity fed into the atomic age. It's perhaps the most spectacularly wrong prediction ever made in defense of a beautiful thesis. Mathematics is the young man's game. Hardy states this baldly. Mathematics, more than any other art or science, belongs to the young. He knew of no major mathematical advance initiated by a man past 50. Garius died at 20, Abel at 26, Ramanujan at 32, Riemann at 39. His roll call of genius is a roll call of early deaths. Whether he was empirically right is debated. The loss of mathematical creativity is a death. It's a kind of death in life that preceded actual death. The dark coda. The loss of both his powers and his independence. Hardy attempted to end his life. He survived and died of natural causes in 47. Wanted his final achievement to be hearing his beloved cricket scores. Since this touches on a sensitive topic, if anything in your own life ever resonates with that kind of despair, why the book endures. It remains the most read book ever written about. I actually feel like I should have used Fable way more before it went out. I would have loved to use Fable way more. Why the book endures. It remains the most read book ever written about what it feels like to be a mathematician. Assigned to students for 80 years, quoted at memorials, beloved even by people who reject every one of its arguments. Part of its power is exactly the contrast structure you identified earlier. It's a celebration of youth written from old age, a defense of mathematics written by a man who could no longer do it, a claim that only the doing matters embedded in a piece of writing that outlived all his theorems in public memory. The lives of medieval mystics. Whether we are watching a mind decline or a mind follow its own logic to its end, to the end. The key to dream. La clef des songes. La clef des songes. Dreams is her have. Written around 87. Thesis is stated with disarming directness. Dreams are sent by God, and God's existence is something Grothendieck claims to have discovered. Not chosen to believe, but being forced to conclude by the evidence of his own dream life. The dreaming is the tell. He approached his mysticism exactly as he had approached algebraic geometry, insisting he was being compelled by evidence, refusing to accept a conclusion until the structure of the phenomena left him no alternative. The mathematician who trusted that the right generalization would make a theorem prove itself now trusted that the right attention would make God self evident. The method never changed, only the sub object did. Now trusted that the right attention would make God self-evident. The method never changed, only the object did. The divine feminine, woven through the late writings, is a preoccupation with the feminine aspect of the divine, God as the source and dreamer of dreams. Approach through images that his biographers connect to his attempt to reconcile the rationalist and the maternal, the cosmic and the intimate. This material is harder to summarize cleanly because much of it survives only in unpublished notes, and readers disagree about how coherent it is. dreamer of dreams, approached through images of his biographies. The Devil and the Speed of Light. The strangest and most cited episode, Grothendieck became convinced that the devil was actively at work falsifying the physical world. A signature example was that the speed of light had originally been a harmonious, presumably round value, and that the devil had nudged it to its actual ugly figure as a kind of cosmic vandalism. A deliberate marring of the world's mathematical beauty. There's something almost unbearably poignant in this. The man whose entire genius lay in perceiving hidden harmony beneath surface mess ended by interpreting the mess itself as evidence of a malevolent intelligence defacing the harmony. Almost unbearably poignant in this, the man whose entire genius lay in perceiving hidden harmony beneath surface mess ended by interpreting the mess itself as evidence of a malevolent intelligence defacing the harmony. His aesthetic sense of mathematics beauty as the deepest truth, the same instinct Hardy described, had curdled into a theology. Tell me more famous, more people who were at the top of their said a lot about beauty is the deepest truth. Let's see. Ugliness is literally diabolical. The prophet face. In 1990, he sent a lettre de la bonne nouvelle, letter of the good news to around 250 people, announcing that God had revealed truths to him and that a new age was imminent, with a specific date for a coming day of reckoning. The date passed without event. Around the same period, he burned a large mass of his own writings. Undertook extreme fast. One in the late 80s reportedly brought him close to starvation before a neighbor intervened. Solved by subtracting the body entirely. That survives a staggering tens of thousands of pages of meditations. Structure de la psyché, circulated largely unpublished, kept by his family, entangled in access disputes after he died. He demanded his mathematical work be withdrawn from circulation. He wanted it seems to be remembered for none of the things that made him immortal. Paranoia, possible psychiatric illness, great mind disintegrating. Devil in fasting material does have the texture of pathology. A relentless drive toward the most fundamental level, a refusal to stop at any answer that wasn't ultimate, a conviction that beauty and truth are the same thing, that the world's deep structure is there to be seen by anyone patient and innocent enough to look. Follow the disposition into number theory and you get schemes and topoi. Consumes the mathematician entirely. He's the proof that the trapdoor at the bottom of mathematics opens in onto something generally vertiginous, and that not everyone who falls through it lands somewhere we would call wisdom. Some land somewhere stranger and more solitary, and we are still a decade after his death, not sure whether to call it a ruin or a kind of arrival. There's an almost unbroken tradition of people at the absolute summit of their fields insisting that beauty isn't a decoration on top of truth, but the very thing that leads you to truth. Dirac, the patron saint, Paul Dirac, made the strongest version of the claim anyone has ever made. His view, stated repeatedly, was that it is more important for an equation to be beautiful than for it to fit experiment. If it's beautiful and disagrees with the experiment is probably wrong or incomplete, whereas an ugly theory is doomed regardless. This was an idle aestheticism. His beautiful equation predicted antimatter before anyone had seen it, purely because the symmetry demanded a mirror particle. Late in life, he traveled, giving a lecture essentially titled Beauty as a Method of Research. Purely because the symmetry demanded a mirror particle. Later in life, he traveled giving a lecture essentially titled Beauty as a Method of Research. Beauty as a method of research. He's the purest case of beauty used not as a reward but as a compass. Beauty as a compass. His beautiful equation predicted antimatter before anyone had seen it, purely because the symmetry demanded a mirror particle. Later in life, he traveled giving a lecture essentially titled Beauty as a Method of Research. He's the purest case of beauty used not as a reward but as a compass. Einstein and the inner perfection. Einstein judged external confirmation and what he called inner perfection of felt naturalness and inevitability, the sense that the theory couldn't have been otherwise. General relativity hold on him was Einstein judged theories by two criteria: external confirmation and what he called inner perfection. Of naturalness and inevitability, they sensed that the theory couldn't have been otherwise. General relativity hold on him was largely this: he found it too beautiful to be false. and was famously relaxed about early experimental confirmations because he already trusted the structure. Bound up with it was his cosmic religious feeling, a Spinozan reverence for the harmony of the world that functioned for him as both motive and reward. Einstein and the inner perfection. Einstein judged theories by two criteria: external confirmation and what he called inner perfection, a felt naturalness and inevitability, the sense that the theory couldn't have been otherwise. General relativity's hold on him was largely this: he found it too beautiful to be false, and was famously relaxed about early experimental confirmations because he already trusted the structure. In Hindi, on the emotion of feeling like you have everything when you are with her. Oh my god. Oh my. Okay, let's actually first do this thing. Your own. आपका क्लॉड आज़म में स्वागत है। ट्यूसडे 9 PM महफिल जमाते हैं। ब्रिंग योर ओन शायरी। AI generated or आपका क्लॉड आज़म में स्वागत है। ट्यूसडे 9 PM महफिल जमाते हैं। आओ महफिल जमाते हैं। ब्रिंग योर ओन शायरी AI जनरेटेड और आपकी खुद की लिखी हुई। Interesting. Okay, let's go. तेरे साथ हूँ तो लगता है जहाँ सारा मेरा है, तेरी आँखों में ही तो मेरा हर सवेरा है. इंटीमेट इमोशनल कंप्लीटनेस. ना दौलत की चाह ना शोहरत की तलब, ना दौलत की चाह ना शोहरत की तलब, तू पास है तो दुनिया की हर नेमत, अरे हर नेमत मेरी है. जो तेरा हाथ थामा तो मिल गया सब कुछ, तू ही मेरी ज़मी, तू ही मेरा, तू तू ही मेरा आसमां मेरा है. ओ एयर better metaphors. Oh, Fable wrote really good shairi. This is not that good. Oh my god. Wow. तेरे होते तो थामूं खाली हथेली अपनी, तेरे होते जो थामूं खाली हथेली अपनी, तो लगे जैसे समंदर को मुट्ठी में भर लिया है. तेरे साथ हूँ तो खाली दामन भी भरा लगे, वीरा सा हर सहरा भी मुझको हरा लगे, तू पास हो तो दुनिया का हर गम ज़रा लगे, हर सांस में जैसे पूरा जहां मेरा लगे. We are using Opus 4.8 Max, and let's actually test how ChatGPT performs. Write me शायरी in Hindi. Whoa. This is long. तुम साथ हो तो लगता है ज़िंदगी ने अपनी सारी दौलत मेरे नाम कर दी है, न कोई ख्वाहिश अधूरी लगती है, न कोई मंजिल दूर दिखाई देती है. ओह माय गॉड, ओह माय गॉड, ओह माय गॉड. तुम साथ हो तो लगता है ज़िंदगी ने अपनी सारी दौलत मेरे नाम कर दी है, न कोई ख्वाहिश अधूरी लगती है, न कोई मंजिल दूर दिखाई देती है. तेरी हंसी में ऐसी बरकत है कि सुना दिन भी त्योहार बन जाता है. और सच कहूँ जब तुम मेरे पास होती हो तो ऐसा लगता है जैसे दुनिया की हर, अरे ये क्या है, नेमत, मेरे पास सब कुछ है क्योंकि मेरे पास तुम हो. Make it the traditional 4-line format, make it rhyme. तेरा साथ मिला तो मुकम्मल जहां हो गया, सोना सा दिल मेरा गुलिस्तां हो गया, अब और किसी चीज़ की ख्वाहिश नहीं रही, तू मिली तो लगा सब कुछ आसान हो गया. Now you're using Opus 4.8 Max. Oh my god. Empty hands becoming an ocean, a beggar transformed into a king, another powerful transformation that captured the feeling of completeness when together. Now, working through the actual quatrains, crafting them with clean rhyme schemes. Desert becoming garden, the rhyme pattern uses Gulzar, Gulnar, and Gulbar to create that flowering effect, showing how the beloved's presence transforms bareness into abundance. Bahar ho gaya, that completes the verse nicely with the rhyme scheme. The real goal is finding fresher, more striking, architected 10 distinct metaphors with refined rhyme schemes. तेरा साथ मिला तो मुकम्मल जहां हो गया, सोना सा दिल मेरा गुलिस्तां हो गया, अब और किसी चीज़ की ख्वाहिश नहीं रही, तो मिली तो लगा सब कुछ आसान हो गया. तेरी बाहों में आकर सुकून मिल जाता है, हर अधूरा ख्वाब जैसे जुनून बन जाता है. क्या मांगूं मैं अब रब से किसी और चीज़ को, तू साथ हो तो दिल माला माल हो जाता है. ओ माय गॉड, ओ माय गॉड, लेट्स गो. तेरी नज़रों में ऐसा असर पा लिया, जैसे दुनिया का हर खजाना पा लिया, अब और क्या चाहूँ इस ज़िंदगी से मैं, तेरे साथ रहकर सब कुछ पा लिया. Oh my god, Fable was really good. तू पास हो तो दिल को करार आता है, हर मौसम में बहार का खुमार आता है, दौलत शोहरत दुनिया सब फीकी लगती है, तेरे साथ मिले तो सब कुछ पास आता है. फीकी, आई लाइक द आइडिया ऑफ फीकी. तेरा साथ मिला तो मेरी चाय फीकी लगती है. तेरा साथ मिला तो कमी कोई रही नहीं, दिल की वीरान रहे कभी यूं सजी नहीं, मांगू भी तो अब रब से क्या मांगू, तू मिली तो लगता है कुछ भी कमी नहीं. तेरी मुस्कान से हर रंग निखर जाता है, दिल का सोना सा नगर भी सवर जाता है, तेरे होते हुए क्या देखूं मैं दुनिया को, तेरे आगे तो दुनिया सब फीकी लगती है. No. Extended. हर शेर के पीछे एक अलग केंद्रीय तस्वीर रखी है, खाली मट्टी थी मुट्ठियाँ जो खाली जहाँ भर लिया मैंने, थी मुट्ठियाँ जो खाली जहाँ भर लिया मैंने, तेरा जो हाथ थामा समा भर लिया मैंने, हर टूटते सितारे का निशान भर लिया मैंने, तू पास है तो सारा आसमां भर लिया मैंने। मैं उम्र भर का था फ़कीर, शहंशाह कर दिया, हाथों की हर लकीर में एक आसमान भर दिया, दर दर भटकता था मुझे अपना घर दिया, तू क्या मिली खुदा ने मुझे सब हुनर दिया। Oh my god, Fable was so good. This is so shitty. This is so shitty. Fable was so good. जिन रातों में रोया करता तकिए से बातें करता था, वही रातें कहती है देख इंतज़ार किसका रंग लाया था। टूटना भी ज़रूरी था शायद, वरना तेरी कदर कहाँ होती, हर हीरे की चमक के पीछे चोट की एक दास्तां होती। मोहब्बत बाहर नहीं मिलती, ये अंदर का एक दिया है, जिसने खुद को अपना लिया उसने सब कुछ जी लिया है। तू साथ है तो सहरा भी गुलजार हो गया, हर खार मेरी राह का गुलनार हो गया, सूखा पड़ा था दिल मगर सरशार हो गया, तेरे कदम पड़े तो जहाँ में बहार हो गया। तू साथ है तो सहरा भी गुलजार हो गया, हर खार मेरी राह का गुलनार हो गया। तू चांद बन के आई तो तू चांद बन के आई तो हर शब सवर गई, मेरी हर एक तिरंगी दिल से उतर गई, तेरे उजाले से ये दुनिया निखर गई, तू क्या मिली अंधेरों की सल्तनत बिखर गई। मैं कैद था किसी पिंजरे में बेज़ुबां हुआ, तू आई मेरे हिस्से में सारा आसमान हुआ, हर बंद दर मेरी किस्मत का फिर आया हुआ, तेरे परों में छुपा सारा गुलिस्तां हुआ। मैं एक नदी था जो भटकती थी हर राह में, तू मिल गई तो दरिया समाया निगाह में, हर मौज मेरी आ गई तेरी पनाह में, अब तो समंदर झूमता है मेरी बाह में। बंजर शजर था मैं बंजर शंजर था मैं, हरा भरा बना दिया, हर सूखी टहनी को नया मौसम थमा दिया, मुरझाए फूल को भी महकना सिखा दिया, तू धूप बन के आई तो जंगल खिला दिया। तेरी निगाह में पूरा जहां देख लिया, हर मोड़ पर मैंने आसमान देख लिया, तेरे ही अक्स में अपना मकान देख लिया, तुझ में छुपा हर एक निशान देख लिया। Oh my god, these are not that good. तेरा साथ हो तो हर कमी दूर लगती है, सोनी राह भी फूलों से भरपूर लगती है, अब और क्या मांगूँ मैं इस ज़माने से, तू पास हो तो किस्मत भी मंजूर लगती है। Alright, it's 1 hour. We'll hit the